Well, ladies and gentlemen, as BEE is such a big thing and it's in the news and it's topical at the moment, I thought I'd actually get an expert on fighting BEE, and that's Russell Lamberti of Sakeliga. Hey,
Byron,
Russell,
very good
nice
to
to have
be
you on the
with you.
show.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to this chat. There's a lot to get into on this topic.
Yeah, so it's been some time since we've actually spoken about the topic of BEE, and obviously Sakeliga is in the throes of pushing forward updates, education pieces, if you want, of the general public of third wave BEE. Could you describe third wave BE for us so we know basically what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to understand the third wave, you need a brief understanding of what it means to talk about wave one and two. But essentially, these three waves refer to a ratcheting up of BE requirements and the onerousness with which the state is trying to implement these policies. Phase one or wave one is really a phenomenon in the 1990s, early 2000s, kind of voluntary empowerment deals, political maneuvering. Wave two becomes the statutory phase of BEE, where it becomes an act of parliament, the BEE Act of 2003, implemented in 2004. We've seen a shifting of goalposts. We've seen various sectoral charters and regulations and other pieces of legislation that have tried to tighten the noose of BEE. But the statutory phase of BEE, Wave 2, primarily deals with your ability to contract with the state or to do business with government or state tenders and so on. It nonetheless it does tremendous harm because it dramatically limits the pool of suppliers to all levels of government and all state entities. And so we see a pretty rapid deterioration in state services, an increase in costs, and a deterioration in the quality of state services, from municipal government services all the way through to parastatals. And I mean, the stories are legion. We know about Eskom, we know about rail, we know about water provision and all these kinds of things. One of the cornerstones of those failures is the dramatic limitation of who can supply, which raises costs and diminishes quality. That brings us all the way through to around about the sort of 2018 period, which is when Cyril Ramaphosa becomes president. Cyril Ramaphosa is an architect of BEE, an early beneficiary of the early empowerment deal structures, but then really at the center of creating statutory BEE in the early 2000s. And under his presidency, we've seen a definite ramping up of BEE that we call the third wave. This is kind of the next stage of this BEE attack, if you like. And this targets primarily, aims to target business-to-business relationships. So where you were having a targeting of business-to-government commercial relationships, now you're trying to insert yourself. The state is trying to insert itself and to insert BEE requirements in private transactions. That's manifesting in a couple of ways. The most obvious ones are the way in which the Competition Commission is adjudicating and regulating mergers and acquisitions and corporate deals, and essentially has put a big, thick layer on top of the ordinary kind of competition considerations called the public interest. And it is interpreting the public interest essentially as transformation. Does this deal or this merger or this acquisition enhance racial transformation, i.e. Lead to more black ownership, more black beneficiaries, and so on and so forth? That's one way. The other way that Wave 3 is manifesting is in the attempt to couple BEE licenses to BEE to your operating license. So do you have a BE certificate? Is it of a certain level? Various departments and regulatory bodies within certain sectors are now trying to say you need a certain level of BE to get a license to operate at all. In other words, to exist as a business. That's a very new thing. That's a complete ratcheting up of where we are. So that's what Wave 3 looks like. Wave 3 is trying to hold corporate deals to ransom, and it is trying to put people out of business unless they play this game. It is trying to marginalize them entirely out of sectors, or at the very least greatly diminish their ability to operate, their scope of operations, and so on. So it's a considerable assault, and it's a very, very clear ratcheting up of the BEE framework.
Okay, so let's start off with the obvious question, which I know everybody in my audience is probably going to ask, and that is, why are they doing it? Because a lot of the studies now coming out show that BEE doesn't actually benefit the average individual on the street. As Mr. Moletsi Mbeki, said in his report, what BEE has been shown, proven categorically to do is empower the same individuals over and over again with no real consideration for the average individual. So the question remains, why are
this
they
is a
doing
good question. At Sakeliga, we think that there's three core reasons why this persists and why this is intensifying. Number one is kind of pure power politics. We think that the Ramaphosa administration, the ANC-led government, and the ANC-dominated state sees BE as one of the kind of key tools and mechanisms of hierarchy entrenchment along kind of racial ethnic lines. So the establishment and the solidification of an ethnic hierarchy and the maintenance of that power. It's number one. Number two, we think that what's involved here is good, plain old economic ignorance. There is a lack of understanding of how these mechanisms actually work on the ground when it comes to raising equity, financing businesses, finding shareholders, the cost of equity, how that drives. BE raises the cost of equity dramatically. It drives businesses towards more debt. They become more fragile. Companies that do BE more have higher default rates. This has been shown in various studies. So the economics of BE are really bad. In fact, we like to often say the problem with BE is not the black part; it's the economic part. It's the economics. It's a very, very bad economic structure. Now, with that lack of understanding of the stagnation that BE, employment equity, all sorts of other rules and regulations that stifle business in this country, the lack of understanding there is that when you lack that understanding, you think that you often think that the solution to the persistent poverty and unemployment and growth stagnation is to do more of this thing that you believe will fix it, when it's actually the poison, not the cure. So that's another reason why this persists. And then the final reason, we think, is certainly of the three main reasons, and there could be others as well, is that you have an entrenched beneficiary group now that's been established over time. More people want to join that group, and that group wants to extend its interests, deepen its interests, widen its benefits and deepen its benefits. And so that represents a very concentrated but very powerful lobby group that lobbies very, very hard for these policies. So, when you stack up those three kind of core ideas together, you can see why we have persistent BE and escalating BE rules and regulations, along with what follows with this, which is the way the Competition Commission is behaving, which is the Employment Equity regulations, which is the Land Expropriation Act. All this is kind of feeding into these, is fed by these three core reasons, Byron. And so people need to understand that this is not something. These are three very strong. These are three strongholds. These are three very, very powerful forces. People need to understand that this is not just something that you're going to get rid of because you wrote a clever opinion piece, that was published on the Daily Friend or in the Business Day or in a particular publication. Like this is an entrenched assault backed up by very, very strong, clear, pretty well-defined political interests, and we need to recognize it for what it is. It's an attack, first and foremost, on white people doing business, white people in the workplace, white-owned businesses. It's an explicit attack on that group. However, it also has what we call a colorblind negative multiplier effect or negative spin-off effect, and that is that in a sort of strange twist of irony, it ends up harming people from all groups. Black people are harmed tremendously by these onerous employment equity regulations, BE regulations. We have a stagnant economy, have had a stagnant economy for nearly 2 decades, dramatically lagged growth in the rest of the world, could easily have an economy double the size that we have today, at least 50% bigger, maybe even 100% bigger than we have today if we'd been on a normal growth trajectory over the last 10 or 20 years. And that is due to this massive opportunity cost and burdens that are placed on this economy. That would have created more empowerment than you could imagine. An economy double the size and an unemployment rate probably cut in half. Millions more people employed, even more millions supported by those who are employed, way fewer people on social welfare, way less strain on the public purse. All these kinds of benefits from growth. But that's not been the path that's been taken. And unfortunately, you get into this very toxic equilibrium where the government now looks to double down on these policies.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the really curious things was recently, as you'll know, they started to discuss in Parliament this equity alternative. Obviously, that's been applied now to Starlink, and some of the responses from ANC-led MPs were quite telling. Some of them said that they were, and I quote, sickened by the thought of not having BE. I thought that was a very strange response to a potential alternative to the mechanism. Some of them, they all do the old schizo thing where they all just turn around and call each other sellouts and, betrayers of the revolution and, giving it back to the white person and apartheid beneficiaries and what. You know the thing. But fundamentally, I've made this suggestion on my own show a few times. There is a very easy way to understand this. And this is, let's say, for example, you have a kid, the kid grows, the kid's born in 2000. The kid's now, as of today, 25 years old, right? That kid's gone through the same schooling as any of his black peers who have in many instances had many alternatives and benefits that he wouldn't have necessarily had throughout his schooling. Let's just say he gets a matric, nothing more, because we don't want to have claims of, systematic racism or, somehow some kind of non-conscious bias or whatever other rubbish. Let's say the kid goes to a casino, puts a 5 rand coin in the machine and wins 100 million rand. Okay, let's just say. We're talking obviously fantasy, but let's do it. So he gets 100 million. So now you can't say that he got his capital or his wealth through any perceived gain. He got it through nothing more than luck. That kid now wants to go buy, I don't know, a petrol station. He can't buy it because he has to give at least 25% away on a BE equity deal to a black individual. He's not allowed to own that petrol station entirely because he will be restricted by the licensing criteria. Play that entire scenario all over again. Swap the white kid with a black kid. No difference. The same thing. Black kid, born in 2000, gone through schools, had assistance from the state, goes, puts 5 rand in a machine, wins the 100 million, wants to buy a petrol station. He's allowed to 100% own that business. In fact, he'll probably get some kind of equity deal or some kind of assistance on it as being a young black entrepreneur because he'll get some form of state assistance. It's very difficult to argue in those two instances that the BEE policy applied to the black individual, limiting the white individual's, should we say, scope or possibility, isn't anything but pure, unadulterated racism. Am I wrong? Am I misreading it?
I don't think you're misreading it, Byron, but I do think that different groups in this country, and this is just a fact, this is just an observation, are going to view these things in very, very different terms. There are people who will take the scenario you've just described and call it redress, call it, they'll say, well, actually that black kid, that black kid came from, he's come from poorer background. He got some legs up, sure, maybe went to a free government school or what have you, but ultimately comes from an environment where he has little access to capital. His family are generally poor. The white kid's family is generally, better off. And there'll be all sorts of justifications for these sorts of things. Race restrictive policies are always justified in real time. There's always a reason. There's always some sort of clever sounding justification. I'm in a sense almost less interested in how some groups are going to label that versus other groups. I certainly think it's unfair. I certainly think that it's very harmful both to the person who's disadvantaged, the white guy who's disadvantaged from it, but it also has all these spin-off harms because it limits who can sell assets to who, it limits investment potential, so we get this kind of stagnation, which loops back to harming the unemployed. I mean, the people with the least voice in this country are the people who don't have jobs in the first place and that don't have any hope of getting any jobs. I think these are racist policies. I think they're harmful. I think they're a direct attack on the vital economic interests of white people, white business owners, white capitalists. But ultimately, what I think about this is less important than what I plan to try and do about this, how much I try and plan to push back. Now, it's not to say, I don't want to trivialize the kind of ethical dimension of this. I think these discussions have to ground themselves in some version of ethics. I just think that trying to convince everyone of your ethic is very difficult. I think it's probably a fool's errand in the big picture. People might get there. They might get there over time. When they see mountains of evidence, eventually they might come alongside and say, okay, I finally agree with you. But it's very difficult to kind of convince everyone that that's the case. Our role is to say, well, who's being attacked, who thinks this is wrong, and who's willing to get behind a solution and a fight back. And I think that's what I'm interested in. That's what we're doing. So we probably agree a lot on a lot of these dynamics, and we're going to be part of a group that's going to fight back. The most natural the most natural group that's initially going to resonate with that fight back are the people who are directly harmed and impacted by it, but maybe not exclusively. We see support from actually all groups. Certainly Sakeliga gets support from interesting corners of the country that most people wouldn't necessarily expect, because people see the deep-rooted harms that this creates for their own communities. If you can do second and third level thinking, you can actually start to see how this harms all communities. If you can only do first level thinking, then you might think this harms white people, and by harming them, I'm going to get resources and I'm going to benefit. That's an incredibly narrow, incredibly naive, and incredibly ignorant way of trying to understand this problem. It's certainly, it's this kind of zero-sum fixed pie thinking. And of course, when you think in a fixed pie way and you act and you create policies for fixed pie thinking, you create a fixed pie. You create a pie that doesn't grow, and then you do create a kind of zero-sum. You almost self-perpetuate a bit of a zero-sum kind of game of thinking. But the truth is, wealth is not some pre-existing lump that we've got to try and sort of fight over. It is something that is created. It is created through know-how, through capital formation, through business creation, through innovation, through creativity. Yes, we use a sort of given amount of raw materials and what the earth throws up to us, but we can always dig deeper. We can always find more innovative ways of getting the things in the earth and farming better and all these kinds of things. Wealth is created and has been created for thousands of years. Growth is a real thing, and growth is possible, and we see it in countries comparable to South Africa, emerging market countries with high inequality, and also subject to very dependent on commodities, so subject to the so-called curse of commodities and the fluctuating commodity cycles, all the excuses that the ANC has made over the years that, we're subject to this commodity cycle, or we're an unequal society, and so we have high industry concentration, and that's why all these lame excuses. Similar countries around the world have far outstripped South Africa just because they've had more business-friendly policies. Not even very laissez-faire policies, mind you. Relatively high taxation still, but just don't suppress corporate investment like you are doing through mechanisms like BE, where you make it just wholly unattractive to form new businesses, create new capital, and build value. So these excuses are lame, and growth is absolutely within reach, but there's these big strongholds that are blocking it. And I think it's naive to think that, as I said, another opinion piece or that the ANC somehow maybe just lacks good ideas. They just can't quite see it yet, so they need another little nudge, or they need another good opinion piece to help them over the line. That's not the realm that we're in. The realm that we're in is sectional special interests, political power, and a kind of deeply ingrained lack of understanding of how the world actually works that pervades these leadership structures, and that is what we're up against. This assault is only escalating at the moment. We are seeing a ramping up, not just from wave 2 to wave 3, but in wave 3, we are seeing more aggressive attempts, more widespread attempts to entrench these sorts of policies. We've seen the signing of the Employment Equity Act, which to the decimal point is stipulating race quotas in 18 industries and 4 job categories. Everyone is lumped into that spreadsheet, and everyone has to conform to this kind of national demographic picture. It's totally absurd for most businesses to have to conform to this ridiculous grid. Hiring in real life does not work on a grid. It works on organic relationships, applications of staff, who's got the skills, what do we need, what's the right fit. That's how businesses grow and hire and add value. So it's absurd stuff, but it is escalating. And the message I really want to leave with people today is that this is an attack. This is an attack on business. It's an assault on prosperity, and people need to get over the idea that that the way out of this is sweet talking, debating, better ideas, and so on. There needs to be firm, real opposition, pulling the levers of opposition and using leverage where it exists, and realizing and waking up to the fact that your business, your capital, your staff, all these things are under a direct assault. A lot of people don't perceive this and feel this because most people are not business owners. And so most people don't actually understand what it takes to run a business. Byron, you're an entrepreneur. You understand how this stuff, how damaging it can be, how it limits investment, how it raises compliance costs and time and effort. And what that does is it makes it so hard to be a successful entrepreneur that only a very small group of people end up being entrepreneurs, the ones who have the tolerance and the patience and the skill and the tenacity to get over all these hurdles. And those are great entrepreneurs, but if we lower those barriers, we're going to get way more business formation, way more people investing, way more people building businesses, creating products, employing more people, and real growth happening. So this is the environment that we're in, and so we need to understand that there's this assault happening, and we need to now fight back really hard. And that happens, we can get into some of that, but that happens, I think, at a few levels. It's a kind of all hands on deck, all strategies deployed effort to fight back against this.
So certainly, as I'm sure you're all aware, when they came back from their meeting with Trump, Peter Groenewald asked a question in Parliament, which is around, is it time for us to maybe stop categorizing individuals between black, white, and colored? Why are people categorized in that way? Why aren't they just categorized as South African? And is it time to possibly get rid of BEE? And Ramaphosa responded in that, and he said, what is wrong with white people? Why don't they want black people to have, and I quote, he said, why don't they want black people to have the means of production? Now that line itself may seem like a very artificial line, but it's a very Soviet line. It's a very communist Marxist idea, this idea of the means of production. So to a large degree, it's Ramaphosa's ideology coming out to the forefront. And we've seen, he says, the future of South Africa is in BEE. It's in all these enrichment programs that you've just described. So there's a distinct lack of appetite from the state to see this disappear. So my question to you then is, so what can you do about it?
Firstly,
how do you get
firstly,
rid
to
of it?
validate what you're saying, people need to, again, I'm going to emphasize this. People need to be really clear on this. There is a 100% a desire amongst not only within the government, the ANC-led government, and more broadly the ANC-dominated state, and more broadly than that, the ANC-enriched kind of beneficiaries of this system. There is a 100% desire to escalate, not de-escalate, to increase this. That is absolutely the commitment. People should not think that the Trump administration flexing a little bit on this issue, or the pushback that we're actually seeing, is causing a climb down from this. It's actually causing a more like a doubling down. And so we are in a process now. People need to understand this, of escalation, escalation in BE, but also escalation in the opposition to it, and that's going to manifest in something that looks like conflict. And I don't necessarily mean physical conflict. I just mean there's going to be
lawfare.
That's one part of it, but there's going to be flashpoints here. There's going to be considerable amount of argumentation. There's going to be board level, corporate level conflict around these things. I know of numerous examples where corporate boards are deeply divided over these issues. Corporations are not in a healthy place. Many corporations have deeply divided board structures over these very, very topics. How should we comply with the Employment Equity Act? Is it ethical to do so? Can we even do it? Would that not ruin our business? What are the costs of this? And you've got half the board saying we should absolutely do it. This is the right thing to do. And half, we've got a complete dichotomy of kind of corporate ethics here and corporate strategy.
The minister of Trade and Industry, or whatever job title is, the other day actually threatened board members with non-compliance. She actually said, if you don't comply, we will come after you in a hard way. So there was a direct threat issued to corporate members in case they.
So we're going to see conflict mediated through the courts. Yes. So increasing litigation. Sakeliga is ramping up its litigation against BEE. We currently have 3 big cases live right now. 2 of them are on BEE proper. One of them is a very big case, which is the Employment Equity Act, which is in the family of race restrictive policies, strictly not BEE. It's employment equity, which is slightly distinct. Essentially regulates how you hire. BEE regulates how you partner, and shareholding and so on, and who you procure from. Now, so we're going to see conflict there, and we're also going to see increasing escalation in diplomatic pressure and to some extent diplomatic conflict. We're already seeing that with the United States. And we know that other countries are not happy with the trajectory of things. They've perhaps been less vocal about it. There's more quiet, softer diplomacy happening in the background, but companies operating in this country from foreign countries who are, in a sense, represented by their embassies and diplomats and so on, are deeply unhappy with the trajectory that things are going. Some of them actually face tremendous legal conflicts because in their home countries they are actually prohibited from profiling on the basis of race expressly in law.
Well, that's what Trump said. You said that he had obviously outlawed it, and following the Constitutional Court case in the US where they determined this was not something that could be done. That's exactly what Trump says. It says you can't then apply it as a multinational, go to South Africa and have these rules because in the US,
place like Germany, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's expressly prohibited to do any of this, to profile anyone on the basis of race whatsoever. In South Africa, it's expressly being forced. So you've got completely conflicting objectives there. So bottom line is the key theme at the moment is escalation. If people think this is going to go away quietly or they can wish it away, they're mistaken. Now, either you look at that and you say, that's not for me. I don't like where this is going. I'm going to sort of exit the stage left or take the off ramp. And that taking the off ramp could be, I mean, you get some guys who want their version of taking the off ramp could be emigration. Another version of taking the off ramp could be closing down their business and stopping to be an entrepreneur, stopping to be a business owner, liquidating what they've got, and investing it in equity securities and a portfolio of assets and they just kind of do that, or they do something else, or they become an employee. So there's various kind of if you talk about fight or flight strategies, there's the flight strategy, which is kind of just get away from this thing. This escalation's ugly. But if we don't match the escalation in BE with an escalated opposition, we're going to get steamrolled. And that's not acceptable. So we are going to escalate opposition. Sakeliga is doing it. Other organizations are doing it increasingly, and I want to encourage people that this is actually happening out there. Businesses are starting to resist. They're putting in place all kinds of strategies, compliance processes, or should I say restructuring processes, and various mechanisms in place that allow them in clever ways to dodge, sail around, mitigate, limit the impacts of these policies. Some that we've spoken to, and these are quite serious businesses, large businesses, are just saying that they cannot comply. It's not within their ethical framework to comply, and they believe complying will incur bigger costs than taking the chance of not complying, and navigating those risks. That's really important. People need to understand that as much as there are risks of non-compliance, there are also risks of compliance, and sometimes those can be so substantial that the cost-benefit analysis of that is to actually not comply. So there's, and this is going to be very situational specific, very industry specific, very much, based on, a number of complicating factors. But there are a lot of people who are stepping up. We are certainly escalating our litigation substantially. By the end of this year, we plan to be in court on another number of cases pertaining to restrictive policies around BE, around the Competition Commission. We're going to escalate the employment equity litigation. We've only submitted Part A of our application, which is an urgent interdict to have the regulations set aside before the 1st of September 2025 scheduled start of the regulations. We want those set aside while we then bring Part B, which is the substantive part of the case, which is going to take these employment equity regulations on the full spectrum of concerns that we have from them, from the relatively less substantive but still important kind of procedural issues around how the law was created and passed and all that sort of stuff, all the way through to its economic harms and right the way through to kind of constitutional problems that we see with the amendments and the regulations and with the Act itself. So this is underway. And then I would also say that I think we've only seen the opening salvo in the diplomatic pressure that's coming to bear on this stuff, Byron. This is only going to ratchet up. I think it's going to ratchet up under the present U.S. administration. I think it's probably going to ratchet up from Europe as well.
But Europe doesn't seem to be taking that approach, because I think Ramaphosa was in Denmark the other day. I think it was Denmark. I forget. But he was there, and then they were supporting Ramaphosa's so-called transformation agenda, said the news. So it does seem like he's going to all of the states that are prepared to overlook.
I think Europe's a mixed bag, and I think we must get used to a world where Europe doesn't necessarily sing from the same hymn sheet as it perhaps once did under a more unified European Union. I think the European Union, whilst not falling apart, I wouldn't go anywhere near saying that, but I think there's a little bit more fragmentation. There's a little bit more particularity as to how some of the countries think about foreign policy and think about engaging on policy issues with South Africa. And we have reason to believe that there's increasing concerns amongst European embassies representing many European companies that operate in South Africa that are subject to all these provisions, as well as other countries, increasingly there's going to be a kind of ratcheting up of this. I think what America are doing in many ways is kind of breaking ground here and making it acceptable and okay to call these policies out, to call them what they are, which is harmful. They use the word non-tariff barriers. These are barriers to trade. These are barriers to commerce. They constitute a type of unfair treatment. You're treating US companies in a way that US companies wouldn't dream of treating South African companies operating in America. So there's a lack of reciprocity there that the Americans are, particularly under the Trump administration, very, very sensitive to. Hence how they're dealing with the whole world around tariff structures. But they're looking at South Africa and saying, you guys are adding additional layers of complexity, as are some other countries in some other ways. It doesn't usually manifest as a kind of hardcore racial dynamic, although there sometimes is that in other countries. But it's this lack of reciprocity. And I think the Americans are starting to draw a line under that and say, no, this is not acceptable. What's really interesting is that we've not seen much of a proactive response, as far as I can tell, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in South Africa, DIRCO, and the executive, the president, the government. So these tariffs are ramping up. America has, through various channels, communicated a set of kind of, what would be the word, demands, if you like, criteria and preconditions for the normalization of trade. That includes BEE, that includes condemning chants like Kill the Boer.
Apparently those were given to the Freedom Front Plus and the Sakeliga, not Sakeliga, the
that was a delegation that recently went to the United States, and that was communicated back to the South African government via that delegation.
Apparently, DIRCO says they refuse to accept it. Department of Trade says that's not an official channel, and so whilst they've heard this, they say it's they're ignoring it flat out because
and I think there's a head in the sand kind of thing going on there where they're not fronting up to the diplomatic reality. The ANC hasn't really for 30 years had to deal with this kind of diplomatic pressure. It's been the sort of for quite a while the darling of the global international community. It's been able to sort of court both the East and the West in various ways. And now it's running into a very, very different picture and a very different ball game, if you like, with the Trump administration. And it seems to be a little bit some combination of deer in the headlights, wishing it will go away, head in the sand, and potentially seeing it as an opportunity to accelerate its own agenda domestically, accelerate a pivot, to different kind of international relations structures. And to the east to some degree, and potentially to have a scapegoat, to have someone to blame. The Americans are doing this to us. What can we do? We're a sovereign country. These are the bad guys. We're going to have to pivot. We're going to try and sell that story to the population. So there's some combination of this going on. The reality hasn't necessarily quite dawned, and I think if you speak to guys in industry, there's certain sectors that are going to be very, very hard hit by these tariffs, and we're going to have to see how this starts to shake out.
Mate, in the Eastern Cape, in the car industry, there's the places are empty. Like the places that used to be full of cars made and getting ready to ship, they're empty, man. The forecourts are empty. The factories are closed. People haven't seen this.
Yeah,
I drive past them every day. They are empty.
So my understanding was that these guys were, so one of the explanations was that this is a temporary closure. This is kind of happens quite often from time to time. There's kind of this temporary closure happening. So let's see how that shakes out, Byron. But I think there is some serious concern there. There's some serious concern for agricultural exporters. The US is a big market. I think it's a big citrus market for citrus exporters and various other agricultural products. It's an important trading partner. It's not everything. It doesn't constitute the entirety of our trade or anything like that, but it's very, very significant, and it just raises these trade frictions. I mean, I think that the Americans are going to have to deal with their own very, very interesting dynamics around putting tariffs on the whole world. That's certainly going to increase costs of goods coming into the United States. The hope is that that's going to encourage and incentivize more US production. That could happen over time. But the short-term effects of that are going to be tricky for the Trump administration, I think, to navigate. Be that as it may, that's a separate question. That's kind of that's not so much the concern of South Africa. The concern for the South African government is the harmful effects that this is going to have on trade conditions. But more than that, the degree to which, and we don't know the answer to this yet, so let me just say it more speculatively, the degree to which the American government is going to take these 4 conditions that they've communicated through that delegation and perhaps other conditions and start ratcheting up diplomatic pressure and potentially using policy levers to actually escalate the pressure. So they're currently saying these are the conditions for a normalization of trade relations. But what happens if they're not met? What happens if there's no attempt to meet any of these conditions? What's America's move going to be? If it's nothing, then we sit with a tariff structure that was probably coming anyway, that the whole world got. Yeah. Or will we start to see a ratcheting up of those tariff structures or other kinds of measures? And there's a range of things that can be done. So this is a space we've got to watch really carefully now. The bottom line is, I mean, the big picture here, Byron, is that escalation is the theme. There's an escalating policy threat domestically. There's escalating opposition domestically and internationally. And right now, it doesn't look like any of these parties are looking like they're willing or keen to back down. Certainly at Sakeliga, there's no intention to back down. There's no reason to back down. There's a reason to escalate. We have to escalate against this threat. Businesses need to do more to navigate and to figure out ethical non-compliance strategies and restructuring strategies to mitigate the risks and the threats of these, including outright non-compliance where appropriate and where cost effective for them to do so. We're going to see, I think, as international escalation. We can't predict quite the shape that that's going to take, but that's a big lever. That's a big unknown, but a big lever. And then we know for sure that right now the ANC is showing no signs, the government is showing no signs of de-escalation of this issue. And so until we see any signs of that, the theme right now is escalation. People have to brace themselves for a much more kind of conflict-ridden commercial sphere, legal sphere, and international sphere.
Last question, and then I'll let you go. So obviously you did a speech once before. You did a sit-down talk with Conscious Caracal. You talked about it was a good idea to stay in South Africa and build a trench. Is your message still the same, or are we at that stage now where you would start advising individuals to consider the other avenues for their kids' futures?
So what I said in that discussion with Ernst van Zyl, Conscious Caracal, a few years ago was so the key kind of phrase there was there's a time to move and there's a time to dig a trench. And I think the key theme there was that when you decide to move, if and when you decide to move, wherever it might be, are you making that choice with the conscious understanding that you need to get somewhere at some point and dig a trench? Now you might believe that digging that trench it's a more effective and trench to dig in Perth or Sydney or London or North Carolina or some other place, or Holland or Germany or whatever it might be. If so, then stop moaning and whining, move there and dig your trench and defend that which is good, that which is beautiful, that which is true, and do it for future generations. So I think the question is it, the question for many people, and I don't think there's one blanket answer to this, is it still worth digging a trench here in this country? And I think the answer is that parts of this country have decayed so much. I think so much has been lost already in certain regions of this country that I think it's very, very difficult to salvage order, flourishing, prosperity from some of these places. And I think there's other parts of the country that are worth fighting for, worth defending, and worth kind of digging in and making a go of it. So I don't think it's a binary leave or stay argument, unfortunately. I think it's going to very much depend on the individual. It's going to very much depend on kind of where your heart lies and what you perceive to be possible and where you want to dig in and build community and build solutions. I think that so nothing is certain about what we're doing. Things are up in the air, and the future holds a wide range of possibilities. But solving the problems in South Africa right now, tackling them, resisting them, is certainly personally and from a Sakeliga perspective, not only very rewarding, very interesting, but something we feel must be done. And we think that the problems we're facing in this country are not only fascinating, but critical problems that we also think are relevant in many ways and increasingly relevant in the rest of the world and in other parts of the West. And so we think that the mission here is very necessary. We continue to fight it. We continue to escalate that mission rather than de-escalate it. But I think people need to think really hard, not so much about where they want to go so that it is nice and pleasant and peaceful and calm. And I think those places are running out. I think the world is becoming increasingly difficult and chaotic for many reasons. The key is, where do you want to go and dig your trench? You're going to have to dig one, and you're going to have to build for future generations. So figure out where you want to do that. That you will have to do it is unavoidable. There's no free lunch. There's no holiday from history here. You're going to have to go and get involved in the serious work of building order and building freedom for your children. And where you think that's going to be best, go and do that as soon as possible. And therefore, move quickly if you think it should be that you should move. Do it now. If you think you should stay and build now. Invest in organizations that are defending, building, and that for me is the mindset. That's what I was trying to get across in that conversation.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your time, and I know you've got other events to do today. I know you're very busy, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this.
Great to chat, Byron. Good job at Morning Shot.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much.
Take care.